Living in Service with Stefan. Thank you so much, Brad, for doing this. Really appreciate it. Taking the time of this day on this beautiful Auckland day. Let's hope it stays and keeps this way. It's usually, for the overseas listeners, Auckland's weather never is consistent, but so far it's holding up. Clear blue skies, sun is shining.
Yep.
Summer's coming.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Well, first of all, how are you, Brad? How's it going?
It's going all right. It's funny, lately I've been able to, when people ask me how I am, I kind of feel like I have to say, aside from a lot of the pain issues and health stuff that I've been going through recently, which kind of feels like I'm just dragging an anchor behind me, but aside from that, everything's great. Like, I've got a lot of positive stuff going on in my life. I'm really happy with, getting back into working and actually, I've kind of got my first real job, which I never thought would happen. And yeah, new house, like beautiful place to live, and, just feel very blessed and in a lot of ways. But it's just a shame that there's these pain issues going on that we're struggling to get to the bottom of. It's been 2.5 years, surgeries and a bunch of stuff there. So it's it's been a bit of a struggle, but I think that's where I'm grateful for some of the challenges that I have been through in the past. Has given me some of the tools to be able to, work through some adversity and through some of the struggles and be able to, I feel like just being able to put things into kind of boxes where they kind of belong within my own self, whether it's being able to separate things like that, when being us, it's like, okay, yeah, I can separate the pain issues and go, well, life's actually really good aside from that, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's just been nice to be able to kind of build some of that resilience and be in a situation where I can feel like I can sort of overcome pretty much anything.
The eternal optimist. And it does, again, it just echoes back into your book title. You've been faced with constant adversity and then this other degree of adversity, which, hey, many people, even just not only the accident, but just that constant pain in itself would break many people. So that in itself is already just you encapsulating that whole message, of owning it with the pain. Is it like a global pain?
So since the accident happened, I've ended up with neuropathic pain. So it's like pins and needles throughout my whole body, but it's a bit more uncomfortable, a bit more painful than pins and needles, or what I remember that to be. And so that's been ongoing for since the accident. But in the last few years, it was about quarter of the way through 2021, and I just was feeling uncomfortable sitting in my chair. I get this response called autonomic dysreflexia, which is where my body, basically, my body feels something is wrong below my level of injury, and it's generally related to bowel, bladder, or skin. So say my catheter might be blocked and my bladder is overfilling and kind of backing up into the kidneys. It shoots my blood pressure up, and it kind of gives me the sweats, and if it gets bad, it gives me a real pounding headache, and my blood pressure would keep going up and up and up until it would potentially give me a brain aneurysm or a stroke or something like that. And it's very dangerous, but it's also it's nice that my body sends me a signal to say, hey, something's wrong. Time to look into it and figure out what it is. So, and generally it's pretty easy to unblock the catheter or to fix it. But even just sitting in my wheelchair, I was getting this slight sweat going on, which my body doesn't sweat when I'm hot, so I don't have thermoregulation. It's part of the injury. So I don't sweat when I'm hot. I don't get goosebumps when I'm cold. So it's really hard to regulate my temperature. And so this mild sweat was just kind of annoying. Like, I'm going through winter trying to stay warm and I'm sweating. And so I'm just getting cold the whole time. And then we investigated it, like we're digging into it with the doctors, everything like MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds, CTs, what are they called, colonoscopies, all that sort of stuff. I even did a pill cam endoscopy where you swallow a pill, there's a camera in it and takes photos the whole way down, and they found nothing. And it wasn't until the start of 2022 that I was like, all right guys, I can't even sit in my chair anymore, it's just too painful. And so I basically became the real squeaky wheel. Saw the colorectal specialist, and he ended up investigating a bit more, and we discovered I had what's called a perianal fistula, so like in the lower bowel. And again, and this is getting into, you know, like stuff that I've become very comfortable talking about, like bowel bladder, you know, all that sort of stuff. I don't really care. Exactly. But yeah, so how they think it happens is you end up with what's called a fissure tear, which is just kind of like a little rip on your butthole, which is unpleasant for anyone, you know, and it can happen just from sitting on the toilet too long, or you know, so things like that. And then if that doesn't heal properly, you end up with like this little bit of a pocket of infection, and then that infection burrows through the flesh, like through the skin, or not the skin, but internally, and creates a new like kind of narrow passageway, I guess. So I ended up with 4 of these kind of things branching off from my lower bowel, and it just it doesn't sort itself out. So they had to go in. So it was March. So I was basically on bed rest from that point, the start of the year. And then March April I had my first surgery to try to drain them. Second surgery was in July to try and drain them again, because 2 of them drained, 2 of them didn't. And that's when they basically put me on a colostomy bag, which was something I wanted to avoid at all costs. But you know, it has been a bit of a blessing in disguise. It means I don't have to go through the rigorous bowel care routine to try and move my bowels every morning, which was really problematic for me. It was taking several hours. It was like really rough on my body, and that's what led to these issues. So then third surgery was October. Basically, I was on bed rest for 3/4 of last year, and then had another surgery this year. And so it's things are improving. Like I'm sitting in my chair, I can get out and do some things. So things are definitely getting better, but there's just been a lot of discomfort in my lower abdomen. And people find that strange, because they're like, oh, you broke your neck, you're paralyzed, like you shouldn't be able to feel anything.
That's what I was going to ask. So is that like kind of a good thing that your body's being able to process that?
I mean, I like to see it that way. Even from day one, when I was feeling nerve pains, and I was like, I just was like, okay, I've still got some sort of connection with my body. Like it wasn't a complete sever. My spinal cord was just crushed severely. But like little things that, like if I try to wiggle my toes, everything inside my legs feels like it should be working. That's
crazy.
But the toes, just the little piggies just don't wiggle, you know. They don't want to go to the market. And so there is connection there. And the unfortunate thing is that pretty much all I feel is internal feeling, and it's generally pain. So, you know, at the very beginning I was like, okay, well, I'd rather feel a little bit of pain than nothing at all, because it means there's possibility of, you know, things getting better. After 9 years, I'm like, maybe not so much anymore. Like it's kind of chipping away at me, but I don't know. It's just kind of become normal and become part of life now. So if I can get this other stuff sorted, these last few years have just been a bit extra rough. So if I can get that sorted, then I'd be more than happy to just live with the nerve pains again. And you know, I'm on meds and things like that to help out. But it certainly is. I think I was a bit naive, and people don't quite understand the full extent of a spinal cord injury. For most people, it's like, okay, you can't move, you can't walk, or whatever. But you know, the nerve pains, the lack of bowel and bladder function, sexual function, blood pressure issues, as I was saying, autonomic dysreflexia can push my blood pressure up and potentially, be really dangerous. And also my blood pressure can drop quite rapidly, so I'm on blood pressure meds to support that. But yeah, it's there's a lot more to it, and the mental battle on top of that. That's just another whole kettle of fish. But
yeah, because don't know really any other way of saying it, but in a way you're kind of like a pioneer, man, because you're going to what your accident, but two, for you to be going through this constant need for endurance of pain, mental pain, and now here you are relaying it and sharing it with the world. I think in a way it's like you're having to go to these unknown compartments in your mind alone. I imagine how much, and this is what I really want to get into, how much of this whole process for you is mental. And kind of going back into the ICU portion, I remember it's kind of segueing a bit, but there's that moment in the book where I kind of laughed out loud where the nurse put ice on your balls and you're like, what the fuck? Like, get it off.
And that's the one and only time that's actually triggered a feeling, like, because we've had occasions. So the reason they did that, like I had pneumonia, my ending up with fevers and things like that. So, there were times they had to try to cool me down quite rapidly, and the armpits and the groin are the places that really cool you down the fastest. So they did that, and I was like, oh, Jesus, like, was not expecting that. But yeah, it was a weird one. I mean, that was very, very early on, so I don't know why, like, I felt it then, but I, probably wouldn't feel it now. But yeah, that was a very challenging experience, to say the least, that ICU thing, the mental stuff. Like, especially in the early days, it's about just, you can't stop focusing on everything that you've lost and everything you can't do anymore. And you're your own worst enemy. You're sitting there just like, pretty much, I can't think of the word, but you're just, against yourself, going, you're worthless. Like, why did you do this? You fucked your whole life up. Like, and then it even got to the point because, I did this to push the limits of wakeboarding, to try and make it in a sport that I wasn't quite making it in yet. Like, I was doing well, but I wasn't getting paid, and or at least not enough to survive off. And so I was like, this is, I need to make something happen. And we're filming a movie, and I'm like, fuck, I fucked my life up for a stupid movie, for which really, at the time, it meant so much to me to land that trick for the film. But then afterwards, when I'd hurt myself, I'm like, that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. That movie was just, for what I've done to myself and for a sport, like, it was just, I was just constantly attacking myself in my mind, and it was just brutal. So yeah, that was rough, and it took a long time, man. It took 3 years for me to start to turn things around, and then after that, it still took a couple more years for me to get to a place where I felt like I was sort of at peace with things and found acceptance. Which, you've still got that part of the book to dig into, which I'm excited to hear what you think of it. And that's my favorite part of the book. Obviously, the ICU, I didn't enjoy writing it. It was painful. It was really hard reliving that stuff. But reading it and how how I was able to describe it and the reaction I've got from people of how just real, and how much they felt it, and how much they really felt like they were there in the bed where I was laying. So I enjoyed being able to look back at it and kind of kind of feel. Sorry, one second. May as well. You right there, Florence?
just a little cough going on, but that's completely adds to the ambience. It's perfect.
It's all good.
We've got Brad's lovely caregiver, I presume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't
here.
sure if you guys were like just run it and just keep going,
Yeah, no,
or just
great.
trim little bits out.
This is all real. We in the studio here.
Yeah.
We got people here. It's good. It's great.
Yeah.
But
all good.
sorry, Brad, as you were.
No, I just liked how I was able to really describe that,
Yeah.
and then I was really proud of how that part came out. But then everything after that, like later on, this is where all the learnings, all the mental battles, all the struggles, all the things that. I was very lucky to have a woman named Susie, a kinesiologist, and a friend who guided me through the mental journey, and just for me to be able to put that down on paper in a way that was easy for people to digest. And because you get these like sort of self-help like books, like ones by like Eckhart Tolle and the sort of guru, getting to a place of peace and mindfulness and all that, but it's quite a leap to get to that. So I tried reading some of those books, and it was just I wasn't from where I was to where they were trying to get me. It was a massive leap. Whereas in my book, I've tried to make it like stepping stones, and not like going, oh yeah, hey, this is the learning, and this is the way to kind of get through what you're going through. And then it wasn't like, okay, bing, cool, done. Like a switch was flipped. It was a struggle, and it's constant work, and it still is. It's, I think a lot of the misconceptions around mental health and a lot of the things that we need to work on is that people think that you can learn something and you kind of get over it and then you never deal with it again. That's not the case at all. It's more that you just get better and better at dealing with these things. The more you work on it, the more you sit with it and kind of learn about these things, then you get better at dealing with it. But I think life is always going to throw shit in our direction, and you're never going to be able to avoid that. But it's just building resilience and fortifying the mind in ways of looking inward and kind of going through the tough journey of breaking down the toxic beliefs that we've been led to believe over the years. And like for an example, like one of them for me that I really had to learn was around inadequacy and about me feeling like I was no longer good enough or worthy of, I didn't think any woman would want to be with me in this situation because I'd lost my physical ability. And that's because I put all my value on my physical ability. And the reality is, like, there is so much value that we have outside of that. And I just had to learn that that's something that was worth it, and that made me, like I've had relationships since the accidents happened, and had women that I never thought would fall in love with me that didn't know me before the accident. They didn't know the pro athlete Brad, who was a model and had abs and all that stuff. Like I'd lost all that, and so I'm like, didn't think that was kind of on the cards for me anymore, but proved that wrong. And that was, I guess, the toxic belief was that all women are interested in is, the physical stuff. And, so that was, that was part of the journey there, was digging into all that sort of stuff and kind of readjusting my programming, I guess, in my mind of what I value and about myself, and it was a journey of self-love really to find myself again, and very grateful. It was a fucking tough road, but I'm very grateful to have gone through that, because it means that I've got these tools and I'm equipped with the stuff to be able to get through the shit now.
And that's kind of what I was meaning before about you being a pioneer. Hate to put a big label on it, but in a way you are. You're having to really go to those bounds and places where people, I think they know it, but they don't really know unless they're in a real hole. And when they're in a real hole, they don't know where the fuck to go. They feel so helpless. And you said it just going back a bit, you said a really good phrase, and I think it's very true, is that people do expect it to be like a light switch that, I can turn it on and on, I'm sweet, I'm relieved of this pain, this trauma, this anxiety, this depression, but it doesn't work that way. And the way you said that, it is a fucking process, and it may never leave you, but for you to have the ability to endure ultimately and accept the burdens of life, and this in itself is your whole thing, is owning it, which I think, again, echoing back to that title, it just resonates with me so much, because you're not playing the victim, and I imagine you must have been going through that process of having to feel like, you're the victim, nah, fuck this, fuck, everyone bow down to me, and you had to be like, nah. How did that switch? Because I imagine you've obviously gone far from that. How did that even begin for you?
The whole victim mentality thing was something that Susie and I worked through a lot, and I think that one really came down to control, like understanding what we do and don't have control of, and the thing that I found with, like, when you're feeling like you're a victim, and don't get me wrong, there are legitimate victims out there and people in situations where they are legitimate victims, but a lot of the time we kind of have to look at a lot of these situations and take responsibility for ending up in that situation, getting ourselves into that, and because all we have in life are the choices we make, and that's kind of the path that we go on, and sometimes our choices lead to these things, and I would rather take that on myself and be responsible for the shit I'm going through, because otherwise, like, if I'm not, I'm giving everyone else the power over me and how I feel about myself. And fuck that, like, I don't want to live in that sort of a way and feel that way, because that takes the power away from me. And by being responsible for it, even if it's something that I'm not proud of or something I don't like, or it's taking responsibility and going, okay, well, if going back to owning it, like, if I don't own this, it's not mine, so I can't do anything about it. So if I can grab onto this and go, okay, this is mine, whether I like it or not, if it's a good or a bad thing, if it's mine, then I'm in control of how it makes me feel, or how, what comes from there. So it's a bigger thing, owning it. It's, there's kind of several different angles you can kind of look at it, but I think that one thing where I really felt like a victim, I was like, I just was angry at the world and angry at myself, and that's where I'm grateful that it was my own choices that led to this injury. Yeah. That, I would hate for it to have been like I got hit by a drunk driver or something, because then I'd have hatred towards someone else. Whereas this meant I could take full responsibility and work through it and know that it's mine to own. And
fuck, that must have been tough, bro. The responsibility part.
Yeah.
For you. So is that basically you accepting it? Well, this is my decision. It was due to my actions. That I can't even.
Yeah. And even, so often we say, oh, you've made me feel this way. In whatever situation it might be. It could be a relationship, could be between friends. Someone, could even be on social media, whatever. If someone has made you feel this way, you're giving them power. You're like, we're in control of how we feel. Like, sure, someone could say some shitty things toward you, and you go, okay, well, that just means you're a pretty shitty person. How much value do I give that person's opinion is where it comes down to. Obviously, if it's a family member or someone close, then we kind of need to look at that in a different way and potentially take it on board, because we do need our people around us to keep us in check sometimes. But you got to look at how much power we're giving other people over how we feel about ourselves. Because I just and again I don't want to give other people power over me, like that's and how I feel, because otherwise you're again in that victim box. So no, it's just, that's where I find it's just important to know that we are in control of how we feel, and I think that again just gives us power back and ownership in our own lives.
How did that even that process even begin for you to start making that shift to taking responsibility? Because I just can't imagine that. Yeah. How did that even begin?
I mean, every part of this journey was slow and just chipping away at it. I think how it began would be when Susie would come and see me once a week, and we'd sit there, and she, being a kinesiologist, she would do her kinesiology thing, and I'm not even going to really try and explain how that works because I don't fully understand it.
Yeah.
It's really interesting though, because I very much doubted it from the beginning. I'm like, wait, so you're saying that, because I did a little bit of kinesiology before my accident with her, and so you hold your arm out straight, and then she, basically pushes down on your arm and asks the body a question, and it's generally a yes or no, and whether she can push your arm down or not tells her the answer pretty much. And it's funny because you try to fight it, and sometimes she'll push and your arm goes down, and then other times it stays strong regardless of how much you're fighting it. And it's the body, if she's asking the body something and it's a negative answer or something, then I feel like it's just the body, it's the body's way of saying, oh, nah, I'm not telling an authentic truth at the moment, even if it's not me saying anything, but just what my mind is thinking, or what the question kind of, causes in terms of a reaction within my body. So there's all this kind of connection between the organs and our emotions, and, digging and rubbing this certain spot, and it's going to create a drain to help with this. But then it gets so much deeper and more complex than that. So I'd let her do that, and I go, okay, I have faith in this. And what got me to the point of actually believing it, because I'm like, okay, well, if you're asking my body a yes or no question, surely we can actually figure out a question that I know the answer to that you won't, and we'll see if you're in the ballpark or if you get it right. So I was like, okay, well, how old was I and what month of the year was it that I lost my virginity? And so she goes through process of elimination, 16, 15, and then it's like the body, responded yes, went through the months, and she nailed it. And I was like, okay, maybe there is something to this. And then, and so when she'd come and see me, we'd do our kinesiology sessions, but a lot of the time it would just turn into her coming over, sitting on the couch, and whatever would come up is what we would need to talk about. Because if I was obviously going through a lot of shit, I, trusted her and felt comfortable talking to her about things. So it wasn't like she was even there trying to pry these emotions out and, dig into these things without me initiating it. And so that's kind of how that started. It was just whatever would come up, whether I was feeling inadequate or feeling like a burden on my friends and family, or, there's just so many different emotions that would come up. So we'd just chat through it, and she'd get me to sit with the emotion. So whatever would come up, she's like, okay, well, spend some time sitting with it. Try to understand where it came from, what caused it, what were you doing that led to this emotion, what were you thinking and feeling. And then once you kind of figure that out, it's like you go next layer deeper. What is the belief behind that emotion? So inadequacy, going back to, me feeling like my worth was in my body, like that was the belief behind the emotion. So the fact that I believed that meant it would trigger, that emotional reaction. So by adjusting those belief systems, then it means you can kind of start overcoming that emotion, and it just became a process of, okay, wow, I'll sit with it today, and it just over the time I would go from having like every day was a shitty day to then only a couple of shitty days a week, and then a couple of shitty days a month, and then it gets to the point now where I still have them, but it might only be once every few months, and rather than sitting in that and not being able to overcome it in the space of, a few hours or the rest of the day, now I can kind of engage these learnings. And it's almost like in my mind, there's like a little notification that goes bing. Like if I feel jealous all of a sudden, and then my mind goes, like, it's just is that metacognition. It's the awareness of our thoughts. So the moment I have that thought and that feeling, I'm like, bing, okay, wait, take a step back. What is the belief behind this? And then a lot of the time it's like, how do you actually want to feel in this moment? Like there's a moment in my book that you'll get to, just where I got really jealous over like one of my friends, and something really positive that had happened for them, but I made it about myself. And I hated that feeling. Like I felt, because he's one of my best mates, and I never wanted to feel negative about something positive that happened to my mate, but it happened, and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to feel this. And so then you start to kind of dig into the belief behind it, and honestly, jealousy generally comes from a belief of scarcity. Like, oh, if he's got that, then I can't get it. You know, and it's like, if you start to adjust that to the belief of abundance and knowing that there is an abundance of opportunity out there for everyone, then you stop feeling that sort of a feeling. So just having those little mental notifications pop up is something that I've found really, really valuable, and it just means I can dig myself out of that emotion a lot quicker than it used to take.
There was that portion, I think I just read it a week ago, and it just really hit me, and it's tying into this responsibility piece. I think it was the part, not to give away too much, but the part where I think you technically died, but then you got resuscitated. It was like about a 90-second process where I think your heart stopped, and your mum was there overlooking you. And then I want to read this portion from your book, and it just hit me so hard, because when reading it, I felt like this was that real stepping stone to you fundamentally owning it. And I just really want to share and hear your thoughts. Today's event had changed me. I have no interest in dancing with the Reaper. I've decided to keep fighting because life is starting to feel more and more worth fighting for. I don't want my lights switched off yet. I felt that little portion, for me, it just really hit me, because it seemed, out of all the chaos and the darkness you're feeling, and obviously the fact that you had to come to acceptance and essentially take responsibility, was this thing of you deciding like, nah, I want to keep going. Yeah,
not today, Reaper. That was just, I actually really enjoyed writing that part, because that I think was, and I get confused sometimes between what was in my first draft and what ended up in the actual book. But I remember there was a guy that had been brought into because I was in the trauma ICU, and he got brought in, he'd been shot and ended up dying, and I just remember like knowing and just thinking about everyone that was in this ICU, and we've all got our own journeys and all, going through our own things, and some of us are not making it and some of us are, and I just remember really feeling that way. And I'm like, because up until that point, before that, there were a lot of moments where I was like, nah, I'm done. Like, fuck this. This life isn't worth living for. Like, what could possibly be worth living for with, a life without physical ability? And so, that switch was huge. And it really was triggered by the support that I had from friends and family, especially the Wakewood community, fundraisers going on, and just having that army behind me. It was what made me go, okay, maybe I'll fight this, and see where I can get to. And obviously at the beginning there, at that time I was fully confident that I would prove the doctors wrong. They gave me a 1 to 2% chance of ever gaining upper limb function, forget walking. But I was like, no, you don't know me. You don't know how hard I can work. You don't know how driven I am. You don't know the odds I've defied in the past. So, but that bit of hope, and even though it was kind of blind hope and something that didn't actually come, but having that gave me something to fight for, and it gave me that focus. It gave me that thing to work on, and that was my first 3 years. That's what helped me through. The first 3 years was just fighting and going, okay, no, I'm going to make rehab my full-time job. I'm going to just keep digging into it and just keep going until I prove these doctors wrong. And then obviously after 3 or so years, I was like, yeah, my arms aren't any closer to moving. And that's where I had to kind of shift and work on acceptance and things like that. So.
But I imagine even that process, like having that drive, having that focus, having that hope, key, massive word. I read it somewhere. I think it was today. I get like a daily email, and one of them was exactly that. It's like not losing hope, even when it may feel like blind. There's still something in our being as human beings that always has this drive to live. But I think we forget that when we're in the most seemingly despair-laden situations.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be wise, Brad, that we kind of sort of touch on, the background, what led to the accident, and also where you're going, which is, I think, equally, if not more, damn impressive. But the start in your book, I just love how all these parts come together. But what stood out, and you just touched on, is like, you don't know your drive. Saying to the doctors that, they don't know my drive and my motivation and my discipline. And that's what really stood out to me, is that drive you had, that once you started wakeboarding, you're like, holy fuck. So if we could kind of get back to that portion, I think it'd be important, because in itself, the come up of being a professional athlete, but then also being a wakeboarder in that sport, something that's already so niche, it's elite of the elite.
Yeah, and it was, I was very lucky to find something I was so passionate about at a young age. I was, I think, 11 years old when I first went wakeboarding, and my mum was one of New Zealand's top water skiers, and so we did it as a family, and I just loved it. Like, first time up on a wakeboard, I never water skied again after that. I'm like, this is it. Left school a year early, went to Worlds, and I went over to the States and spent my first season working at a camp there, and just got hooked on the endless summer and the lifestyle, and just, because I snowboarded and I skateboarded and did a little bit of surfing, but I think wakeboarding really grabbed me because, like, endless summer as opposed to endless winter. Like, it just sounds so much more appealing. And you're out on the boat and babes in bikinis and all that good stuff. Like, it was for the lifestyle that I really got into it. And then I learned and realized that you can make a career out of it. And I made enough money to scrape by, but it was, I'd always come home with the credit card maxed out and have to go and just do a bunch of manual labor and wakeboard coaching and try to win whatever events I could, just to, get enough money to pay off my credit card and, save up a little bit to get back to the States. But I was always going back with not enough money. I was always like, knew that I would always struggle, and I would always be battling against it. And the hard part was, a lot of the guys I was competing against had been practically handed everything they needed, and all they had to worry about was what they were doing behind the boat on the water. And for me, I was like, how am I even going to get behind the boat? Like, to pay for gas and to be able to get to the events and all these things. They lived on
lakes. I remember reading in the book. Like,
Mum and Dad give them the gas card, and because that's Orlando. Like, Orlando's got lakes everywhere. Yeah. It's really perfect for wakeboarding, and so I really felt from early on that I was worse off and sort of hard up against it, competing against these guys, because it's not like my parents weren't supportive or anything. They really were.
Very.
But they weren't, especially my dad would come and pick me up, and we'd go wakeboarding. We had this, had a boat that was, it was decent enough. It wasn't one of the proper wakeboard boats that you kind of need, but it was enough for me to be able to train behind, and he'd come pick me up from school and
take you to the Iraqi, right?
Yeah, either Iraqi Basin or down to the Waikato River, and then that boat got stolen, and unfortunately wasn't insured. So, and then when I won Worlds, the boat company that I was working for at the time, that already said, if you win Worlds, we'll give you a boat. And then I won Worlds, and they didn't give me a boat, and I was like, fuck? Yeah, I was pissed about that.
I don't even remember reading that part.
You don't? Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it made the cut.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was after my first Worlds, and then so yeah, I mean that was disappointing. But later down the track, that, you know, if you want to call it adversity, the fact that I wasn't given everything that I needed, and I was really fighting to, you know, had to work really hard to be able to even be there and to be able to show up. When it came to, you know, the couple of years before my accident, and Lake Ronix came about, so it's my board sponsor, you know, they bought this property, and I got to work, you know, I got there and I just like got to work. I did not care that I wasn't wakeboarding most days, you know, and we would, you know, get to go and ride, but it was, for me, I'm like, if I really show my value in how hard I can work here and how passionate I am about this place and how much, you know, I want to be able to live here and manage the place, then that'll put me in this position where, like, I'm saving money on rent and gas for training and, you know, power bills and all that sort of stuff. And it meant I get to live with the most epic training facility in my backyard. Yeah. I had all this support and respect from my peers, and it was just one of those short-term sacrifices to make, you know, get a long-term gain. And had I not been up against it earlier in my career and had all the struggles and those struggles that I had, then I wouldn't have had that work ethic, and I wouldn't have been able to land that job. And so yeah, it's one of those things where adversity can be an asset, and it's just more about going, okay, if I'm in a shitty situation, like, we can either sit back and complain about it, or we can work our way through it and know that it's probably giving us some tools to be able to get through shit in the future.
Sort of like when your parents sent you to King's, right? I laughed because I went to St. Peter's, and I laughed. I laughed so much when I read that part because I could so relate. Like, wait, what? You're sending me to King's?
Yeah, weekly boarding? Are you kidding me? Like, and that was, you know, after my first year at school. So I'm going to the rival school the year after, you know, everyone's been there for a year and formed their for groups of friends and all that sort of stuff. And it was
massive.
Yeah, that was funny. I was so dark that I got sent there, and then I was so stoked the year later when I got my grandma jersey again for Christmas. I unwrapped the present. I'm like, yes.
That was a pretty rad thing with your parents, and I think that was a real telling moment too, because you conveyed it really well of how supportive your parents were, especially, you know, your dad doing that in the evenings. I thought that was so cool, taking you to the basin, you know, and him getting that boat that wasn't necessarily well equipped for doing what you wanted to do, but then he made the adjustments for you, like putting the weight down on the back to get more of that wake, just all those little adjustments. But that portion where you went to your mum, which I thought was even big in itself for you to have the balls to do, was like, hey ma, like, I want to pursue this wakeboarding, which meant you had to drop out of school to then have your dream to go in the US. I thought that was like a real massive turning point too for how, like, you were almost doubling down into this dream you had.
Yeah, and you got to take the risk sometimes. Like, obviously there's a lot of unknowns with that, like dropping out of school, not pursuing the traditional uni and everything like that, and just going, no, I'm going to put everything in this, like throw all my cards down on this. And you know, I wanted to be, like, at that point I was already one of the best in the country at 16, 17 years old, and I just felt like I was a big fish in a small pond, and I wasn't going to grow unless I changed that. And so I surrounded myself with, you know, I worked at one of the best wakeboard camps that there is, or that there was, and surrounded myself with, you know, the best coaches, and put myself in the best situation to learn. And I just put myself in a mindset of just being a sponge, just soak it all up, like, you know, empty your cup. You know, you go into a situation prepared to learn, and instead of thinking I know everything. And I think, you know, my parents were very skeptical about it, and they were, mum was obviously very worried about, you know, what future career and things like that, how that would all look. But when I came home with that junior world title, I think, you know, that's where they were like, okay, you know, he's really got something here. And it was and then the following year, which you would have read, you know, and I go back over, but I wasn't working at a camp, and so I wasn't like getting free riding and board and stuff, and so I just dug myself into a massive hole of debt. And thankfully Mum was really supportive with that, and she basically went, well, hey, I've spent this money on your sister's uni, so, you know, similar amount of money, so let's just write this one off for this year. You're on your own from here on out. Sure, she did bail me out a couple more times. But yeah, it was just, you know, I think that even from her as well was it, you know, it was one of those things where you can't have your parents bail you out all the time, you know, and it basically put the responsibility on me to go, hey, look, if this is something you really want to pursue, then you have to make the sacrifices and have the drive and work ethic and everything to be able to do it. And that's that sort of, you know, bit of tough love. Like it's that balance, you know, that support, but also kind of letting me kind of leave the nest and pursue it on my own.
Yeah, it's a micro example in the scheme of your story, but I remember when I went travelling in 2018, it was coming to the end of the year. I was there for about 7-8 months, and I ran out of money. Reached out to my mum and dad because I didn't want to come home. They're like, nah, we're not giving you anything. Either come home or you have to deal with it. I was like, fuck. But exactly that tough love. But then I had to persevere because I didn't want to go home, so I had to persevere. I think there's that perfect degree of that. You need that. Like, first of all, it's a privilege to have the love, like what a gift, but then to know that you've got that, but then for them to not give you handouts, you know.
Yeah, it puts you in a situation where, like with your situation there, it's like, well, I don't want to go home, so I have to find a way here. Like, you know, your back's up against the wall, and you got to just find a way. And it's and the good thing with that is it teaches us that we have that ability to push through the hard situations, and you know, we can find a way to get through some of that stuff. Because there were times where I was in the States, and I'm like, I was really, when I finally like bought a vehicle over there, even if I didn't have anywhere to stay, I'm like, at least I've got somewhere I can sleep. Yeah, I can pull up anywhere, I can sit, you know, get in the back and like, but when I didn't have that, and I was like relying on, you know, trying to crash on people's couches, and it was just a very unsettling situation to be in. But again, it's when you're in that sort of a situation where things aren't going so smoothly, and you know, you can't even get a bit desperate. Like, you find the generosity that people have, and like there were so many people that were just amazing and helped me out along the way and let me crash on the couch, or you know, and I would do what I could to help out and show my gratitude. But there were some situations where I just you feel sick to your stomach. You're like, how am I going to get out of this? Like, how am I going to get through this moment? And like, there'd be times where I was about to go on tour, and I'm like, I only have enough money for gas to get me from point A to point B, and then I have to hope that I'm going to make a little bit of money at point B so that I can carry on. And I just really hope my truck doesn't die on me, because I have zero reserves, and the anxiety that can build. And you would have read this. I ended up taking some mushrooms, and it was not the right time to be taking mushrooms when I was in that sort of frame of mind. Like, I just ended up spiraling and had a pretty negative trip. But no, it's one of those things. I was on the road for like 4 months, and I just ended up finding places to go and coach and earn a little bit of money, and that's where I picked up like commentating. And I didn't have to pay my entry fees, and I get like $150. It was nothing, but it was enough for me to get to that next spot, to do some coaching, to earn a little bit more and carry on. And I became a pool boy in Texas, and, you know, living with a buddy there and helping him out with his job. And So yeah, it was pretty funny, some of the situations you end up in.
Was there many other people? I can't actually recall you touching on it. Was there many other kids from New Zealand, people, because you said you're basically national champ, so probably not that had made the move that you had?
There was Jeff Weatherall who paved the way for me, basically.
Yeah,
he was our top wakeboarder. I mean, I never got to beat him in the New Zealand Nationals.
Okay.
For whatever reason, no matter how good I rode, he would always one-up me. And in New Zealand Nationals, there were some other events around the world, like some world champs and stuff, that I ended up beating him at, but it was just that thing he always held over me. It was a New Zealand national title, but yeah, he was who I lived with for a couple of the seasons over there, and he was really really helpful with that. And then there was our top woman, like female athlete, was Andrea Fountain, and she was, we were all sort of living together and helping each other out over there. And but there's been a couple of riders that have gone to Orlando and tried to pursue it, but none have really made it. And and performance-wise and how good they are at riding, like some of them have become really good, but it's just the game has stepped up so much, and it takes such dedication. And I was, I kind of regretted not moving to the US, but more full-time earlier on, because I felt like that was one of the things that really held me back and meant
just
that I wasn't...
full immersion, you mean, and just being,
And I think like even sponsors may not have picked me up because they're like, oh, well, we're US based and we're only getting 6 months worth of value out of you each year, as opposed to like even in the winter over there, like it doesn't get too cold in Florida, but then that's when a lot of the boat shows are happening. And so if you've got a boat sponsor, then you go along to the boat shows and you're there to kind of help sell boats. But yeah, I wasn't doing that. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of commitment, and these days, unfortunately, it takes a lot of money. The sport has just escalated to the point where the boats are just getting ridiculously expensive, and which is amazing for the wake size and the performance. But
the boards, like how much have they has that been like? Cause
I mean, I think they're probably on par with inflation, but the boats, like, some of them are $500,000 or more now, and it means that even the boats back when I was riding in those early to mid 2000s, some of the top boats, were only 80 to 100 grand, which then was a decent chunk.
A lot of money.
But now, 20 years later, almost, they're still 80 to 100 grand. Those boats that are 20 years old, and it's because the better boats that have come out have gotten more and more and more expensive. So it hasn't driven the price of these ones down. That's kind of kept them up. So it's tricky. It's a hard one, because you want technology to advance. You want things to get better, but it is making a bit more of an elitist sport. And I can imagine. It's a bit more challenging. Whereas the boat we had was just a bayliner that had like a tower on it and some ballast tanks, and it was close enough to what I would compete behind in those early years.
Not as quick.
Yeah. But
it's just kind of like sort of encapsulating that. It was the drive and the grit and the determination and the balls you had, for lack of a better term, to be able to take that leap to then go over. You said you didn't move, but you just even doing that to live there for 6 months is quite like massive and pivotal, and I think that sort of ties into your whole personality and that story and that grit, and going back to what you were saying to the nurses in the ICU, that like, nah, fuck that, you don't know me. And now here you are kind of with that same degree of mentality, but it's almost cracked up.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, we had a great support system over there, like, the Kiwis and Aussies kind of bounded together, and we'd all ride together and just had such a cool camaraderie. So it was good to have that support, because situations where I did need to crash somewhere, then I could generally rely on one of the boys to let me crash on the couch. And You know, if trying to pull a chick to go and stay with failed, but it was an interesting journey, and then you know, loved the camaraderie that came from when we were at Lake Ronix, and the team were all just working together to try to build this facility for ourselves. That was really cool. But then obviously that's kind of where we lead into the crash and how all that happened. So.
Yeah, which is a perfect segue. So leading up to it, you said you'd in the competitions leading up to it. I can't actually even recall. I've got so many patches missing in the book, but you'd been basically on the precipice of being world champ or close to it. Correct?
Yeah, or not so much world champ.
Yeah.
But so there was an event. It was several weeks before the crash happened, and so what had happened with Lake Ronix, Ronix had kind of partnered with Tech, which was a cable system. So it's like, you know, sort of like a T-bar on the ski lift on the ski mountain, but it takes you back and forth across the lake. Or there's the bigger versions that go round and round, and you can have 10 people on it at a time, and it's like a floating skate park kind of thing. And so we ended up having that, and then there was an event called Wake Open that had this big mega ramp, like big floating landing ramp, like sort of similar to your freestyle motocross landings, but unfortunately not like the new ones that are all inflatable, because that would have been just great, floating on the water, like easy to float, and more a bit more forgiving on crashes. But this was a giant wooden structure. And so they had it for this event, which was in Tampa. And then afterwards it had nowhere to go. So we're like, oh, we'll have it. And so we ended up with this mega ramp landing and kind of built this raised pond or like pool that was on a peninsula that came out from across the lake. And so it was about maybe 2 to 3 meters from water level in the lake to the water level in the pond. So it was kind of like a step up or a step down if you're coming out of the pond. And so we put the ramp in the pond at the top, and would basically go over about a 70-foot land gap and then land down this landing ramp. And it was something that like me and Jeff Weatherall had been talking about for years, like wanting to do it, and even pitched it to Red Bull, and we're trying to like make this thing happen. And then they ended up just taking the idea and putting it into their event, which, you know, we can't claim, you know, I'm not going to claim that we fully came up with the idea and they fully stole it, but it's kind of how it appeared a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, it was awesome that we ended up with this mega ramp, and I think the whole team, we were so pumped on this new direction of the sport, because usually it's, you know, you're competing behind the boat, just doing flips off the wake and crashing into the water. And so I was sort of used to crashing in that sort of way, and that's again one of the factors that led to my accident, was just not being used to falling a certain way on a solid structure. And so yeah, there was the event in Germany that was a few weeks before my crash. That was the only other place in the world that had a mega ramp. So we'd been practicing enough, and I'd just landed my first double flip over the mega ramp.
What are they?
Tantrum, yeah. So it's basically a straight back flip.
Interesting.
Whereas
why is that, by the way? Why do they call it
the name?
Just a back?
It was just one of these things in the early days of wakeboarding. If you were the first to land a trick, you got to name it. You know, and there was like, say, a tantrum with a 360, but instead of passing, you know, if you do a 360 and you're holding onto the handle, you have to pass the handle around your body. Otherwise you get wrapped up in the rope. But there was a way that when you're doing a flip and a spin at the same time, you can like loop the handle up over your head using your arm. And so they called that a whirly bird, like after a helicopter, you know. And so there are all these names, like some of them are real dumb. You got like, well, there's literally one called Dum Dum, which is named after a candy in America, and Tootsie Roll, which is another one. And you know, some of these are like buddies of mine that now that, you know, they were quite young when they landed these tricks, and so they're just coming up with these silly names. But So the difference is a tantrum is sort of a straight backflip, whereas a back roll is like a sideways rolling sort of flip. So that's sort of the difference there. So I did double tantrum, landed it, got invited to Rising High in Germany, big Red Bull event, and so went over to that, and that's where I landed the double tantrum to blind. So double backflip, grabbing indie, so it's backhand on the toe side edge of the board between your feet. And then as you're coming out of the second flip, you can kind of spot your landing a little bit, and then you've got to tug on the rope and pull it into your lower back, and you basically land backwards down the landing ramp. And so that's why it's called a blind landing, because you can't really see where you're going. And yeah, it was just one of these things. I'd gotten so like dialed in on my backflips, on my double tantrums, and a couple of the boys were there, some teammates, and one of my mates from Aussie, and they were there, and they're just egging me on, going, "Yeah, you can do it. Like, go blind." And kind of, I'd thought about it. I'd even tried some back at Lake Ronix, but doing a step up into the pond as opposed to landing on the landing ramp.
I see.
And that was a way for me to learn these tricks, to know that I'd crash into the water as opposed to onto the structure. And I ended up landing it there at that event, but it was in the practice. Didn't land it in the actual event, so I ended up getting fourth, I think. But I knew I was going to win Trick of the Year. And so that's what I think you might have been referring to as opposed to world champion. But Trick of the Year was like the pinnacle.
Right. Because it hadn't been done, right?
No, that trick hadn't been done. And it was sort of, even one of my teammates that was there was Parks Bonifay, and he's like the legend. He's the Tony Hawk of wakeboarding. He's sort of got that, that GOAT status about him, and just one of the biggest legends. And he's such a good dude, and we became really good friends. And he came up to me afterwards, and he was like, "Dude, that was the craziest trick I've ever seen done on a wakeboard." Whoa. And to have someone like that say that to you, it was just mind-blowing. And so I kind of knew I was going to win Trick of the Year, but unfortunately when that event came, or that awards ceremony came around, I was already in the spinal unit. Because we had a movie called Prime that we were filming, and
this is leading up to
so that was kind of like the biggest film of the year, and helicopters, filming wakeboarding, like there was just drones and all this stuff going on. It was like
Nitros, wasn't it? Nitros, Travis Pastrana.
Yeah, we had those guys come out, but that wasn't for that movie. But we did have some days with them coming out to the lake.
And cats, for those that don't know, like they're extreme athletes. So that must have been some fuel for you to. For sure,
I ended up double flipping over Travis Pastrana. And that was pretty cool. I almost took him out, actually, unfortunately. But so we were filming this movie, and it came down to the last day of filming. Yeah. And so I was like, I'd already landed the double tantrum to blind. I'd already landed some good double flips like for the movie, but I'm like, now everyone knows I can land this trick. So if it's not the banger at the end of the section, it's not in the film, it will be a letdown. That was kind of my mindset. And so final day of filming, I'm just putting everything into it. We're even like half an hour into riding, and my legs are starting to get a bit shaky. I'm starting to kind of get a bit worn out, but I'm like, no, I'm not stopping. And I was getting so close to landing it and riding away. I had a few crashes, and I was just a bit stubborn at that point. And because it was make or break for me at that point, I was 27 years old. I'd been going to the States for 10 years by this point. I still hadn't quite made it. I wasn't making enough money to actually be earning money, or like to be anywhere above scraping by. So I was like, I need to make this statement, and I need the sponsors to see me. And so that kind of desperation is, I think, what led me to keep going. And then, just one of them just felt wrong, and I bailed out at the wrong time. I had this kind of bailout point halfway through the first flip. So if you tuck into the flip, and if you stay tucked, you spin really quickly in the flip. But if you open out, then it slows it right down. So halfway through the first flip, if I'd open out and let go of the grab, then I'd be able to just stop it at a single flip, and then, try again. And so that was also how I learnt how to do the double flip, because I'd just open out halfway through the first flip and go, okay, I know how much time I've got. So if I stay tucked, I can kind of gauge it. And from there, it was just balls. Like, it was just that moment of just, going for it. And, I opened out, and I knew I'd gone too big. I knew I'd opened out too late, and I was going to end up continuing on rotating onto my back or my head or something. It was just, everything slowed down. I had enough time to think. Thankfully, I still had tension on the rope. So like that trick I was talking about earlier, the whirly bird, where you loop the handle up over your head and you kind of turn it into a spin. That's basically what I did, but it was like much later than you would usually do it for that whirly bird trick. So I'm coming out of the first flip and then tugged on the rope, spun around, almost like, it was basically, I was 90 degrees short of saving it. And so rather than, obviously standing sideways on a board, when you land, you want the nose of the board facing down the ramp and kind of in the direction you're going. I had my toes facing down the ramp, so I just basically tumbled forward like that. And tried to tuck and roll, because I was like, I don't want to go face first into this thing. Tried to tuck and roll and got my head under, and it just fucking smoked me. Knocked me out, like smashed the helmet off my head. And I ended up face down in the water. And thankfully my buddies were there to get me, and one of them, who I'd made sure he was there that day, because 2 months earlier, because I was living at Lake Ronix and managing the place, I was like, for safety reasons, I need to do a water safety course and CPR course and know what to do if someone gets really hurt out here, because we were pushing the limits, and one of my teammates had already broken his leg pretty badly earlier that season. And so me and my buddy Chad Sharp, another legend of the sport, we went and did this water safety course and the CPR, and part of it was stabilizing a spinal cord injury in the water. And so that was kind of spooky, the fact that, I made sure he was there, and that's exactly what he had to do. So they got to me, he came out with the stand-up paddleboard, like kind of paddled that out to get to me. And him and my buddy Dean Smith, who was one of the top Australian riders. And Dean flipped me over. I was blue in the face, eyes wide open, not responding. He basically thought I was dead. And they kind of pulled me up onto the paddleboard, and we're ready to try and do CPR right there and then. And it wouldn't have worked. You can't do CPR on a floating like paddleboard. But I like to kind of, in my talks, motivational speeches and stuff, I talk about this, and I kind of try to make the joke, because it's a bit of a somber, heavy time, and you want to break that up a little bit. But something inside of me must have known that one of my buddies was about to put his mouth to mine, and so I started breathing on my own. And I woke up, and then that's when it sort of all the chaos set in. They pulled me back into the shore, and I remember, like, at first, when I was still in the water, and I was like, where's my board? Where's my wakeboard? I can't feel it. And then they were like, it's still there, man. It's still on your feet. And then I got to the shoreline, and they're, doing all this other stuff. And then next thing I'm like, oh, can you just take my board off? My feet are killing me. Like, and they're like, it's already off, man. We've already taken it off. And that's when I was like, okay, this is bad. And couldn't move, couldn't feel. First responders got there from the local fire department. And then the helicopter got called in, and I was obviously not so happy about that.
Especially in the US with the exorbitant.
And that's all I was worried about. I'm like, how much is this going to cost me? Like, I can't afford this shit. Yeah. Not realizing that just how the gravity of the situation I was in, and how, life-threatening it was. And so, thankfully my friends were really, really quick to respond, and I got flown off to the hospital and for the MRI, and I don't really remember a lot after that for about a week.
Yeah, it's the part that got me, man. Like, where your mum came, and you just said in the book how you felt this immense guilt. Like, it kind of goes back to you having a responsibility, how you said you had to take responsibility, but that was such a heavy thing that you mentally put yourself through, feeling like you'd done this, and it was your fault, and what had you done, and you know, the fact when your mum came, that hit me, man. That was a hard part to read.
Yeah, and I think most people would feel that, you know, anyone who's got a good relationship with their mum, like, I was just seeing that pain reflected in her eyes, and it just, I couldn't look her in the eyes, like, for any longer than a moment, probably for at least a year or so. Like, it was something that I really struggled with, and that was one of the first things that Susie and I started working through, and she really, you know, was really good at kind of putting it into perspective and going like, look, you're not responsible for your mum, the way your mum reacts. Same as, you know, what I was saying earlier about we're responsible for our own feelings, and you know, I'm not responsible for the way she reacts. Obviously, I was responsible for my injury, but she's a mother. You know, her role as a mother, and just instinctively they're there to care for their children, and so that was her response, but I had to really learn to not hang on to that guilt, and that was hard. It took a long time, but it was certainly a struggle, and it was wild though, like waking up that first morning that I remember, and I'm there and I'm in the room, and I didn't even know that I was paralyzed. I woke up, was oblivious to everything, and I look across and I see this cute nurse, and I'm like, I must have gone home with her last night. Fuck, I must have had a bit to drink. I can't remember shit. I'm like kind of like looking around, and there's like a couple of nurses. I'm like, oh, they must be roommates and getting ready for work. And then she walks in the room, and I'm like, try to sit up and say good morning or something, but I'm like, couldn't move, couldn't talk, couldn't like do anything, because I was on a ventilator at this point. So when you're on a ventilator, you can't speak, because they, you know, you get the hole in the front of your throat where they put the tube in, and they have to inflate a balloon in your throat above it, so that the air doesn't just rush out through your mouth. And so it means you can't speak, you can't eat, you can't drink. And so I had a feeding tube in through my nose. And it was just mad. But waking up and just being oblivious, and then just for it all to hit me, and then I kind of remembered the night before, which I'd had this crazy hallucinations. I thought I'd been kidnapped. I thought I'd been left for dead.
Shit, that tripped me out. I was like, wait, what's happening here? Like I was the wake skater that's taking you away.
Yeah, and it was because the nurse that was looking after me that night, and I didn't realize it because it wasn't until a couple of weeks later that he was rostered on with me again. And then I like looked at him. I'm like, you look really familiar. And he just resembled a wake skater that I knew. So he was there that night while I was like, I had 108 degree Fahrenheit temperature. So like 42 degrees, it's verging on like brain damage sort of material. And they covered me like neck to toe in ice, filled the whole bed up with ice just to cool me down. And I just gone into these wild hallucinations, and I made some connection that wasn't there, and thought these wake skaters were trying to kill me or trying to, it was just such a trippy situation, and just wild to go through 5 or 6 days without remembering anything. And even though I was awake and I was alert and I was responsive to the people around me, but just
one of your friends came, I remember reading, he had come a few days earlier, and apparently you were up and awake, and you were surprised because you're like, oh, good to see you, but you had already seen him.
Yeah, he had already been. He was like, what, dude? Like, I was here a couple of weeks ago. And so that was trippy. And I don't know if it was like a combination of, the impact causing a bit of prolonged concussion, potentially the 9-hour surgery, which they put 2 rods, a plate, 14 screws in my neck to piece it all together, and it took 9 hours. And or just general trauma, potentially the drugs they had me on, but even just my brain protecting me from the trauma of that, which is, I feel like that's probably what it was.
Massive. Just the part, it's the ICU part. I've only just got up to, and it's starting to go lighter, but I think that's a big part of what I want to touch into is you just fuck. How you just had to accept, like we the immensity of such a accident, and but not only that, what people in a daily go through, and they almost feel that the burden of their reality, they put it on the same relative to what you went through in the accident, because they're going through that, and they have that self-perception of, nah, this is unbearable. And yet it ties into that section of, you know, today's event that changed you, where basically your heart stopped. But before that, you coming to terms with the fact that, holy shit, you know, you went through it, all the things you'd realize that you'd lost, but then you having to make that shift. How did you do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I was at a spinal cord injury research symposium the other day, and one of the panelists mentioned that you know, a lot of us in the early days with the sort of an injury, we kind of believe that it's a sentence worse than death. You know, it's like most people would rather in those early weeks would rather die than carry on living with this sort of an injury or this sort of situation. And yeah, like that quote that you read out earlier from the book, you know, where I kind of, you know, I'm not going to let the Reaper take me, or whatever it was. And but yeah, I think it was that turning point where my heart stopped and I almost did die. And then I woke up and I'm like, okay, I've been given another chance. And that was where that turning point happened. Yeah. It's like, okay, I almost got what I was wishing for at that time, because I was wishing for death. And yeah, to have almost got that, and then to come out of it, and then wake up and see my mum's face, and to, yeah, that was really, I think that quote that you read came right after that. And so
yeah, it did.
Yeah,
I think it's massively pivotal in that, and people, the amount of people that are going through that on a daily, and it's like, you know, not to put the burden on you, but like if you're speaking directly, or if right now we're speaking directly to that person, you came to that yourself, so to say, of that acceptance, but also the willingness to continue. How would you, if you could, speak to that person that is in that feeling of being in a pit of despair?
I mean, there's like sort of a quote I heard the other day where it's about, like, when it comes to like suicide, for example, ending our own life, you know, guarantees that things aren't going to get any worse, but it also guarantees that things can't get better. And I mean, I can't remember exactly how it was worded, but something along those lines. And it's, I think there's a chapter that is later on in the book, but it also relates to that pivotal moment. Was and the chapter is called Breakdowns to Breakthroughs. And I think that hitting rock bottom sometimes is necessary to then kind of propel ourselves back up. And so that was sort of a rock bottom moment for me. Like, even further, I didn't think I would actually get to the point where my heart would stop and I would almost be given this, you know, death sentence that I was semi-wishing for at the time. But almost getting that, you know, caused me to go, okay, no, there's more to this, and there's more opportunity, and this is worth fighting for. And yeah, same with that Breakdowns to Breakthroughs chapter, where this is 3 years after the accident, but I was just, all I was focusing on was trying to get my arm movement back. And because I'd fought for 3 years, it's like, if you're trying to, every single day you get up and you go and try to move this boulder that's in your backyard, and every single day you try and move it, and every single day you fail at moving it. You can't budge it, you can't do it, and you try for 3 years, and it just chips away at you, and you just get, I was just getting deeper and deeper into depression, and just I was having some pain issues as well, so I ended up back at the spinal unit for a couple of weeks to investigate the pain stuff, which I think was probably the start of what I've been going through for the last few years, but even though it was several years before that. And I just decided, okay, I need to figure this out mentally. And I'm jumping forward a little bit from like ICU to this, but it's it was really a moment of all right, I need to go get rid of all distractions. I need to sit with this and understand maybe what I'm resisting as well, like in stuff that Susie had already taught me, like around acceptance and things like that. And I've realized that I was resisting acceptance even 3 years later. And I
fully accepting your reality.
Yeah, and that was because acceptance to me felt submissive as well.
Yeah.
I'm like, this isn't something empowering. This isn't something that I feel like I can grab onto and move forward with. And so that's where owning it came about, because it's like, okay, that's another step forward past acceptance. It's like, not just going, okay, well, I guess I'm this. It's going, well, fuck yeah, this is me, and it's like grabbing onto it and owning it. And that's, I think, just the way that I had lived my life before, and I felt like I needed that in order to feel like I was back to being myself again. I'm excited for you to get to that point, because that's where I really start to let all these learnings that Susie had kind of come to me with and help me work through. I started to really let them sink in and grab a hold of them and stop looking back at everything I couldn't do anymore, and started going, all right, what can I do? What are the opportunities there for me? What am I grateful for that I do have, as opposed to going, what don't I have anymore? And that just comes down to gratitude, really, and that's just so powerful. Because, going back to, I think it was something I was talking about earlier around control and what we do and don't have control of. And if we really, really strip it back, I feel like there's three main things that we can have full control of in our lives, and that's our attitude, our effort, and our actions. And focusing in on those three things allows us to really grab onto what we have control of and kind of brush aside all the bullshit that, all these things that we feel, even our own bodies, we don't have full control of that. Like, we don't have control of whether we get cancer or not. Like, that stuff happens. We can mitigate that. We can do everything we can to be healthy and all that sort of stuff, but full control, we're not in control of our car. That can break down at any point. We're not in control of how others feel about us or anything like that. It's and that was a huge point for me to learn all of that and to really let that soak in, to go, all right, because in my situation, obviously, I've got less control than in most able-bodied people, and I've got to rely on caregivers. I've got to rely on ACC and government funding and all these other things and medication, and so bringing it back to those three things, attitude, effort, action, just simplifies it. And it's like, also kind of leads into what's important in life, and like the way we treat others. And because you think about when we're long gone, the amount of money you had or sorts of cars and all this sort of thing, it doesn't matter. No one remembers that shit. People remember how you made them feel. And I think that's the
impact that you left.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this book is you doing that, is leaving that impact. And that's amazing. I find that is so powerful in speaking, going back to the question of really speaking to that person who is feeling hopeless and in that pit of despair, is the way you convey that is attitude, effort, and reaction. I think that's action. Action. Yeah, I think that again, people might, it's easier said than done, but really, it's not easy. I think that's the whole scope of things. Like, here you are owning it. And as you just touched on at the start of this conversation, it's not easy, but you're getting more and more equipped with dealing with this. It seems you're getting more of a vantage point, but you're still in that pain, or still having to endure the process of, say, let's walking up that mountain, but you're getting more and more of a vantage point. You may never reach the peak, but you know for a fact that you are making steadfast,
capable of making those gains and going uphill. And but yeah, I obviously went on a bit of a tangent there, but I think going back to what would I say to someone, it's that there's always possibility of things getting better. And I think, because I've recently become or got involved with Spinal Support New Zealand, so become like a peer supporter. I go back to the spinal unit every now and again and go and meet new people who are going through these injuries, because I remember how lonely I felt and how scary it was, and you just have all these beliefs about what life might be. And that was the biggest thing, is that's why I was struggling with acceptance, because I was trying to accept all these things that were like future based. It was all like, I was trying to accept all these fears that I had around what my future might be, when acceptance is only accepting the here and now, the reality of where we are right now. And so when I go in to meet people, I don't go in with the attitude of like, I certainly don't say, oh, this is how your life is going to be, because I have no idea. Everyone's life is different. But I just go in and I say, look, I felt that same way, but I've been incredibly lucky to do some amazing things, have some incredible experiences, to have, beautiful women fall in love with me, to have found new passions and new drives, and yes, life is still very challenging. But even when it comes to like a spinal cord injury, because I'm coming from the perspective of someone who hasn't regained movement, but a lot of people do. So it's like, dig into the rehab, fight for every bit of movement back that you can in those first few years. But yeah, don't be afraid to look at what I guess the actual goal is for me. And that initially it was I wanted to try and get arm movement back, and I thought that was my path to happiness. And I'm like, well, the actual goal is happiness. It's not moving my arms. Yes, that's part of it, but the real goal is happiness. So if I can get to a point of being happy, even in the situation I'm in, then to me that's somewhat of a recovery. And so yeah, it's hard. We all go through challenging times on different scales, and I just think it's really important to know that there is always hope. And as much as we feel like we're a burden on people, people love to be able to help. And that's one thing, with because it's living in service, right? It's the name of this podcast. And so that's something that I've come to, where as opposed to centering things around myself and doing things for myself, the times where I feel the best is when I've done something to help someone else. And that's huge. I think that's such a big thing to learn and understand and focus on, is knowing that the more that we can help others, and the more that we can make a positive impact on, even if it's just one person, to me that's more of a successful life than becoming a millionaire or having a Lamborghini or whatever these people will try to convince you in some of these podcasts you see online. But
I feel you there. Yeah, and I think ties into the writing of the book. I guess you've answered it, but really, with writing that book, what was your intentions for writing this book?
Oh, to make loads of money. No, you never make money off writing a book, or like unless it just sells like crazy. But because you only make a few bucks.
This podcast might do that.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, but that's the thing. You make a few bucks per book. But the first thing was the challenge of actually doing it and completing it, and knowing, and like persevering and actually finishing it was something I just really wanted to do, because I was offered a ghostwriter to come in and basically sit with me, and I'd tell them my story and they'd write the book for me. I'm like, well, there's very few things that I can actually do for myself anymore. So if writing a book, if there's a possibility of doing that, then I'll do it. And I have my phone mounted in front of me, biting onto a mouth stick.
Yeah, can you please just I saw some videos. I'm like, fuck, bro, that looks.
It was taking a challenging thing on its own, like writing a book, and just throwing in all these other extra challenges.
People have freaking recliner, fireplace, cup of tea. You can chill. You're bound, man.
Yeah, and so I've got this like mouth stick stylus that I bite onto, and I use that to use my phone, and I just typed away for 6 years. Was how long it took me to write it, and. To be honest, from the beginning, it was just like the first thing I wrote was that morning I woke up in the hospital, and just because I just remember recalling that, and I'm like, okay, I want to write this down, and I wrote it probably 2 years after it happened, and so at the time, like I didn't have a publishing deal or anything. I just was like, okay, I want to write this, and I even thought the book would end with me walking again, or I didn't really know where it would go at that point. And so I was just writing mainly pre-injury stuff, or just like ICU sort of situation, those first couple of things I wrote, which was that morning, and then also the hallucinations. But yeah, it was just a challenge I wanted to be able to do, and so I just worked my way through it, and then I ended up getting a publishing deal, and I got the book deal, and that's when like we had deadlines and stuff like that coming in, and I must have pushed my deadline back probably 5 or 6 times, probably a year and a half, I think, from the initial target. So, but no, it was just like also because I had no idea how to write a book. Because I'd probably never really read that many books before my accident. I was outside playing and pushing myself physically. That wasn't my thing. And so I'd read a couple of books post-accident, and then all I knew was, okay, I'm going to write it in first-person present tense, and I got that from reading Andre Agassi's book, Open, which he does really well in that. And then
super.
And it's good. It really makes you feel like you're there in his shoes. And so I wanted to do that. So I just basically brain dumped my whole story, and I ended up with almost 500,000 words for my first draft, which is just way too many. My contract was for 80,000 words, and so I finished the draft, sent it off to the editors, and it was their job to whittle it down and trim the fat and cut out the stuff that was unnecessary and repetitive or anything like that. But they kept it very much my writing. And I think it got down to about 215,000 words. So like I think it's about 500 pages. So it's not a small book, as you know.
Yeah. I like that. It's a cool factor, man.
Yeah, and it was just something I really wanted to do and wanted to achieve, and I'm really proud that I persevered and did that. And but the main reason for it was, like, the way I can sum it up is, I wanted to help people learn what I've learned without going through what I've been through. And that could be people going through a similar situation to me, or anyone who's going through any sort of adversity, which we all do. So it's really, it was to, like, the thing that gets me now are the messages I get from people who have read the book, and they're saying, oh my God, I can't believe, some of the messages and how, like, I'm able to apply them to my own situation, and you've given me this new way to look at life. And there was even 1 or 2 people that wrote to me and said, hey, look, I don't even know if I would be here anymore if I hadn't found your book. And that's pretty heavy to read that, but to know that there's the possibility of having that sort of an impact is huge. And so again, it's not about me. I wanted to tell my story vulnerably and openly so that others didn't feel so alone and they could connect and relate. Whereas, and I even had a couple of negative reviews from people who are like, they got through, were reading through the first part of the book, and they're like, oh, it just sounds like you're bragging about, all the chicks you've slept with and this and that. And I'm like, well, it kind of is. Like, that's what it was, because first person present tense writing, I have to write from the mindset that I was at that time.
Yeah.
And I was a young dude traveling the world, single, living it up, having a good time, and so I had to convey that to then show the growth that was able to come afterwards, and to show how I was able to, I guess, and also how that sort of a mentality that I had had such a negative impact after my accident. And so, I wanted to be a very raw, real story, because you get so many of these athlete biographies that are so vanilla because they're afraid of exposing themselves in ways that might get a negative reaction. And honestly, I wrote this and I'm like, I do not care if someone reads it and doesn't like it or thinks a certain way about me, because that's just me. This is my journey. You can't write a book that's going to, please everyone. So as long as I know that I'm, if I'm going to make a positive impact on some people, and if by being open and sharing all of that can help other people, then that's awesome.
You're owning the story. You're literally owning your story.
Yep.
It's what got me with that as well was how you, in the memorandum at the beginning, it was in memory of those lost friends, and I couldn't help but think that's why I asked the question. I was curious, and it basically suggested what I thought is that, it really is a guidebook, it's a handbook, it's a tool, it's a resource for those people that are having to go through or are inevitably going through shit that no one else in their mind can understand or perceive. And it's like, hey, let's not try compare, but you're going through it, but now here's this toolbook, here's this resource. Yeah,
and some of those names took their own lives. Some of them, were taken through other situations, but none of the ones that took their own lives, I had no idea that they were struggling. No idea at all. And that's often the case. You just don't even know. And even oftentimes it's the person you least expect that ends up going ahead and does it. And it's, so again, that was sort of part of it for me, is like, if I can have any impact on that and making someone believe and know that it is okay to struggle and it's okay to not be okay, and we have to be easy on ourselves in that way. And because we are told you have to harden up and you got to push through everything and blah blah blah, but you got to rest sometimes. You got to take time for yourself and to recover and to be able to understand what we're going through and find our feet again. And there's just this toxic belief that you especially as men, that we're not allowed to feel that sort of stuff. So that was one of the big driving factors behind it. And
I appreciate it. It's an amazing book. I wish I had the physical with me because I could show it on the camera. And I was actually meant to call you to ask you to bring a copy for that reason.
Yeah, I thought of it on the way here. I forgot.
Owning it is the title of the book, and we've kind of been saying it throughout the whole conversation.
And what are we gonna up on screen in After Effects? Just here's the book, bing, right here, There you go. Not to throw you on the deep end there for editing.
There you go. There's the cue. Bing. I won't take too much of your time, Brad. And as I said, I really appreciate you taking the time for this and for this conversation. It's deeply moving, and I think now, you've gone through all that, you'll face this adversity and still are. Hey, fuck, we all are. And in your situation, you are, as you've said at the beginning of this conversation, you're still going through your pains and having to deal through that. But you're on this process, and I'm curious now, and I've seen some of it, which is what you're doing is amazing. And it's now this next leap, as you just touched on, is now you in these speaking engagements and these talks, and you've got that Aripa affiliation, which I think in itself is massive, because what they're all about is the it's a nootropic, correct? Is that?
Yeah, and there's there's even an article came out the other day about potential like lack of evidence and things like that around it, but they've had neuroscientists work on it, and it is a their focus as a brand is on mental health and brain health, and which for me it was just an amazing connection and easy to partner with a brand like that, because I would never partner with anyone that I don't believe in what they do, or and so love the motivational speaking. Again, it's something I feel like I'm giving, and I feel like I'm sharing openly, and I'm able to potentially help someone, and so again, I feel really, really good after those sorts of talks, and love doing the brand partnership and creating some meaningful content in a situation where we've got social media which is full of so much toxic shit.
Which is contributing to this whole mess we're in massively.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like if I can just be a small part in being the opposite of that, and having a positive voice on social media, then it's another really cool thing that I'm enjoying doing. And but in terms of like where I mentioned that turning point where I was like, stop looking at what I can't do anymore and started looking at what can I do. So those were some of the things that came into it, but even just my own adventures and pushing myself, and I've ended up getting into free diving, and which people are like, you can't even swim, bro. Like, what are you even free diving? So, and that was just because I was like, okay, what can I do? What experiences can I have that would be very similar for me than they would for everyone else? And initially I was like skydiving and scuba diving, and then the scuba dive doctor said no. And this is another really cool story that's in the book that I think it's got a cool message behind it, where I was so set on going scuba diving, and this dive doctor said no. He's like, there's medical risk from nitrogen bubbles forming on your scar tissue on your spinal cord, or some I didn't even really listen. I just heard him say medical risk, but he said it was from breathing compressed gas underwater. So I'm like, okay, so if I hold my breath, then that eliminates that risk. And he's, obviously was like, oh yeah, you can't swim. I'm like, I'll figure that part out. Don't worry about that. And so then I just started practicing holding my breath, and I had a buddy, Bob Sovan, who's another top pro wakeboarder, and he came to New Zealand, and he and my buddy Jesse got me in the swimming pool and flipped me over on my front, and I was just holding my breath for a while, and they walked me up and down a couple laps of the pool, and within a few tries of, like, before my accident, I could hold my breath for maybe 3.5 minutes, and that's
impressive, man.
So I was like pushing myself then, but not regularly or anything, but then after the accident, and when I first started trying to hold my breath again, it only took 3 or 4 times for me to beat that record, and the next thing I was getting like up around 5 minutes, and my record now is 5 minutes and 45 seconds. And look, I haven't done it in a little while. Like COVID came in, stopped a lot there, and then these health issues. But it was just something that the doctor closing that door on my face, going, "Nut, you're not going scuba diving," and I was crushed, but only for a moment. And then I'm like, actually. And then I found freediving, which has given me so much more than what just scuba diving would have done. It's given me progression again in a life where I completely lost progression. I was trying to get my arm movement back, wasn't getting anywhere. I was so used to pushing myself every day as a pro wakeboarder and crashing, like I was used to failing over and over again just to succeed. And I was missing that, and I felt lost without that. And so, sometimes we think we know where we want to go in life, but really those doors that close on us are sometimes leading us to the doors that are meant to open. And my friend of mine that I've connected with since my accident, her name's Emma Carey. She had a skydiving accident. The parachute didn't open properly. Tandem skydiving in Switzerland, and she hit the deck and she's walking again, and it's one of those things just miraculous. And her and I both released a book around the same time, and so I read hers, and there's this really cool story in it that I really loved. It's called "The Girl Who Fell from the Sky," and it's about, that same thing, the door closing on us and leading us where we're meant to go. It's almost like, if we think of God or the universe or whatever the power that you believe, if we think of that as like the owner of a dog, and I'm the dog, and I really want, like, my owner has got this like chocolate chip cookie, and I really want to eat that chocolate chip cookie. But my owner knows that as a dog, I'm not supposed to eat chocolate, and it's actually really bad for you and it can kill you. But I don't know that. And so I just want that. I just want to eat it, but it knows what's better for me. And so, obviously it doesn't let me eat it. And it's, it's just kind of an analogy for having faith in the process and that we're being led where we're supposed to go. And I'm not a religious person, but that faith is similar to what a religious faith would be.
Yeah.
And it's just going, no, I believe that if I do the things that I'm in control of and I work for what I want, then, that thing that I want, it may come to me or it may not. If it doesn't come to me, then it's not meant for me. And it's leading me to the thing that is meant for me. And I've found that so, so powerful for just letting go of this control of trying to, get everything that we think we want and feel like we're in complete control of our lives there. And that's just something it's allowed me to just kind of let go a little bit and just trust the process.
Attitude, effort, action.
Yep.
I love it, brother. Thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, man, I can't wait to listen back to this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
There's a lot. And I think just to the people, they should definitely read your book, Owning It, by Brad Smeele, obviously. Where can they find that, and where can people just find more, and even speaking engagements? Where's all that information?
Yeah, so most of it you can find through my social media, through my Instagram. It's just my first and last name, Brad Smeele. Smeele, which
Smeele.
Well, it's weird Dutch pronunciation, but
Smeele.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people.
No, yeah, everyone does. But no, and so yeah, social media. And the link in the bio. I've got all the links for where you can get the book, but it should be at most bookstores, especially off New Zealand, across New Zealand and Australia.
Right.
Paper Plus, Wickles, all that. It's on Kindle. There's a few different versions of the ebook.
Awesome.
So however you consume your ebooks, you could probably find it there. And and on top of that, like if you want to reach out for any reason, whether it is speaking engagements, you can reach out to, again, it's all there in my profile, but essential talent or celebrity speakers, and would love to come and share my story. And but yeah, even if someone's struggling and they just want to reach out and have a chat, I'll always make an effort to respond to the messages I get, and yeah, I like to be able to connect with people, and if there's any way that I can help, then I'll do my best to do so. But I think one thing that, yeah, as you're saying, like reading the book, that was my way of just putting it all down and out there so it's accessible to anyone.
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's so vital, and as I said, it's almost like a toolbook and a resource. And yeah, I mean it's literally the motto, and I so relate to it and live by that. Is you just got to fucking own it, whatever it is you're dealing with.
Yeah, and to sum it up, the book is sex, drugs, partying, tragedy, overcoming adversity, inspiration, self-help, all packed into one.
Yeah, man.
So it's a nice juicy read that it's funny. Yeah, you get some of the ladies are like, oh yeah, I got to get that book. Like they love to get into the juiciness of of a real story. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I'll have all the links in the show notes of this episode. But yeah, to you, Brad, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for your service, ultimately, and yeah, let's keep in touch. I think this is just the start of a relationship, man. Because what you've taught me and the impact you've had on me, and in a short time I've finally met you, but just knowing of your story, I can't really describe how much it's been for me. So I thank you.
It's awesome. My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Awesome.
Cut.
Cut!
Oh, shit, I wasn't recording. Fuck.